Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news, and going into the summer break, Ferrari have confirmed they have upgrades due for their ERS power system going into the Belgian Grand Prix after the break. This may well have positive ramifications in the long term for the team, but in the short term, further engine penalties will be in order, which could open the door to their rivals. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you are new as always. Firstly, I wanted to mention this. Daniel Riccardo says hello on Instagram. Now look, he knows what's going on right now. Is this an indication here on the summer break that Riccardo signed a contract, is going to Alpine, signed, sealed, delivered? Like, I'm not really sure as of yet, but we would expect that to be the case. Piastri to McLaren seems like a done deal. Riccardo, you would imagine, will go back to Renault, back to Alpine. That is the present rumour. Of course, look, all the drivers right now on summer break having a good time chilling. Well, Fernando Alonso's driving karts as per usual, but Otmar at Alpine has actually said that yes, like, look, they would have no issue bringing Riccardo back if Piastri doesn't drive for them, as it seems presently they will not. I also mentioned this yesterday that apparently they received 14 calls from drivers about their 2023 seat that Piastri and Alonso, of course, have now vacated. They apparently are going to narrow that down to 4 and then continue the conversations. They're not necessarily seemingly too eager to sign Riccardo and get him locked in, even though that would be the move we expect to happen. They could well consider other options. There might be other drivers right now on the grid in consideration for that final Alpine seat. We'll see that here in a second. And of course, there could be drivers not on the grid, the likes of Nico Hülkenberg, I'm sure would like a seat like this, but look, Riccardo probably makes sense. Then again, it's not like he's performed this year, but maybe in a different car, he could have different fortunes with maybe, well, obviously he's got quite a lot to prove at the moment, but could be called to head back to that team and try and get one over on his former team in McLaren, where they, of course, are currently fighting it out for 4th place in the championship this year. You might imagine a similar story next season. Now, some other drivers in consideration, of course, Pierre Gasly is someone to at least mention. French team, French driver, yes. Gasly and Ocon as teammates don't particularly get on that well, so that maybe wouldn't be the greatest driver pairing in the world, but still, it could happen, I suppose. Of course, I believe he has a clause in his AlphaTauri contract where if a team above them in the standings gives him an offer, he is able to leave that contract. So if Alpine did offer Gasly, they could probably get him, but will they? That's another story. The other name kind of being thrown around is Mick Schumacher, because the rumour had it that we talked about a few days ago that apparently Haas aren't so keen in re-signing him. Definitely some mixed messages coming out though, because Günther Steiner actually mentioned here in an interview that in Canada, like, Schumacher showed a change, seemed to hit new levels. Then of course, shortly after Canada, went to Silverstone, scored his first points. Then in Austria, had a great drive there as well, probably the drive or the weekend of his career so far, with a great sprint performance as well. So interesting stuff really from Haas, because Mick Schumacher does seem to have turned a corner, but the last 2 races still haven't been so good. Then again, right, it's not like he got the new upgrade package, the white Ferrari or whatever, that of course Kevin Magnussen, his teammate, received, even though he still delivered a solid performance in the race, all things considered. But Haas have said, look, we're not locking in our second driver in addition to Magnussen, well, so far for next season. We don't know if it's going to be Schumacher. We haven't signed him. We're going to wait a little while. And also they said that, look, we don't care what Ferrari have to say, our engine supplier, on our driver, because, look, I guess it's Haas's choice at the end of the day. Ferrari might say, look, Haas, please keep Mick Schumacher around. He's in our Ferrari driver school program thing. Of course, the Schumacher name, legendary for Ferrari. So they might imply that, or might say that to Günther Steiner and the team, but they can make their call. And apparently they don't want to keep him, which is a kind of a surprise to me, but apparently he might be a free agent, I suppose, that could go to Alpine. But as I say, Riccardo is the more likely option. Of course, Alonso's side of the story, he's going to Aston Martin. Word from Mike Crack, of course, their team principal, saying, in the future, I see Aston Martin as a team where success is the norm. I see a team that's not surprised to be on the podium winning races. That seems a bit of a stretch, but look, Alonso obviously thinks that this team with Lawrence Stroll at the helm has more ambition than Alpine does, or maybe they just have straight up more money and that's why Alonso's got there in the first place, right? But yeah, it's interesting to hear this perspective. Look, you can say this all you like, achieving it is another matter, but they do at least intend to deliver the goods. This also of note on the calendar for next season. The Las Vegas Grand Prix that's going to come through for next season, apparently the contract there is going to run through 2027, going to stay the same weekend lot for 5 years. This Grand Prix is going to run on a Saturday night, effectively, in Las Vegas, so that in Europe and elsewhere it's going to be, well, an early morning race, but in Las Vegas it's going to be nighttime on a Saturday, so early morning here in the UK and other countries on the Sunday. That's the plan. That apparently is going to be next year, November 16th through to the 18th, and then the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix is 1 weekend later. So that's going to be quite something, especially if it's a tight championship, to go to, well, just heading into into the final couple of races of the season to have Las Vegas, a track that's never been driven before by Formula 1 cars, like at 2 weekends out effectively from the end of the championship. That's rather interesting. No further details yet on what the rest of the calendar might look like. Rumour that Spa is going to be gone, but others are saying it's going to stay for one more year and then be in some sort of rotation. And apparently the French Grand Prix is gone as well, so I guess we shall wait and see on that one. Now let's talk about Ferrari. So this article came out the Formula 1 put out, and I thought that this was kind of the same thing as what he said the other day, where he says, look, we don't need any change, our strategy is perfectly fine, there's nothing wrong with Ferrari, and we're just getting unlucky or something like that, or our car just wasn't good, and that's why we lost the race or whatever. So yes, obviously not been great for Ferrari. We were wondering, is there any denial going on in that Ferrari camp? Of course, look, he wants to defend his team. Charles Leclerc came out and said that actually behind the scenes, the conversations are rather different, or rather more critical than maybe what comes out to the public. But he did go on to reiterate that yes, their approach is good, the strategy department is fine, XYZ, that's probably not going to actually cause anything to change going forwards. Now look, he's praised Charles Leclerc as well. Tammy kind of translates the article right here. It's great to see Charles' enthusiasm. It's all about passion, the way you behave, the way you drive. He's doing it very well. Good for us, good for him. It raises expectations even more. Of course, it's the pressure we have on our shoulders. Overall, I think Charles is a fantastic driver. Without a doubt, the way he races, fights on track, the way he defends or attacks, he's outstanding. And that, I think, is what people and the fans like to see. So yeah, some good comments from Bonotto on Charles, as you might expect. But this was kind of the spicy thing from the article about the power unit, right? So my understanding is that the power unit, there was kind of a slight freeze in power unit development earlier this year, back in March. But I believe the official deadline comes in for the start of September, when the power unit the teams currently have will effectively freeze in September and be the same for the next 3 years, 2023, 4 and 5, into 2026 when the new regulations come into play. So in a month's time, in a few weeks' time, the engines will freeze as they are, and any development that the teams have done is going to stay as it is. So Mercedes might not have the most powerful engine, but they might well have the most reliable engine, and Ferrari have the most powerful engine, but not necessarily the other way around. So they're obviously trying to bring reliability upgrades to their car, but also the ERS system, which we'll explain here in a second. So Bonotto says, we pushed the limit of performance beyond what we would normally have done in a reliability plan, and that was because we knew it would be important to catch up with the competition before the PU freeze. In previous years, Ferrari have lacked straight up power from their engine since the whole, the scandal a few years ago. So they've focused on performance, which they've achieved very nicely, but effectively at the cost of reliability. He says, look, by this, I do not mean that we arrived at the first race thinking we were entirely unreliable. That was not the case. In the winter, there were no problems, but we knew we did not have an ideal solution, saying plus the problems we had on the track did not show up in the simulations. I think they are unforeseen problems typical of a new project. You have to take them into account, so I'm not completely surprised by what happens. And said, I can say that what we were able to develop during the last season in view of 2022 on the PU front is something that I've never seen in my 25 plus years at Maranello. It is an example of what this team is capable of, saying, wow, our engine is absolutely fantastic. The power we have under the bonnet, not really a bonnet on Formula 1 cars, but you get what I'm saying, is pretty spectacular, right? So look, we'll see if their great power in the Ferrari engine can actually be translated into reliability with effectively a few more weeks of upgrades. Now, the other tweak that they're making is to the ERS system. So if you guys are unfamiliar with this, there's two ways that F1 cars can go faster than a base level. One is DRS, right? The flap opening when you're within 1 second of the car in front. The other one is ERS, the energy recovery system. When the cars brake around the track, there's technology in the cars to recover some of that energy into, power that can be deployed electronically. So there's effectively a hybrid engine, you've got the regular internal combustion engine, and then you've got the electric motor, which can be deployed as ERS energy when you want to overtake or, get away from someone's DRS behind you or whatever. So Bonotto says, and Ferrari say, they are working on a new ERS system. Yes, we expect developments on the hybrids before the freezing period begins. We are working on it, but it will not be a turning point. This is something he quite likes to say rather often here, saying, look, it's not going to be a turning point, but, he'd rather say that just so he doesn't get, kind of quote tweeted as being a moment that preceded an unfortunate event, than say, yes, it's going to deliver more performance, but effectively here he's saying, yes, this is going to deliver more performance. Now, if you want to change the ERS system, you're going to have to put in new parts that are associated with that new ERS system. These are the parts that you're allowed: the internal combustion engine, the turbos, the MGUH, the MGUK, energy store control electronics. Already, I believe Carlos Sainz has taken another entire one of these control electronics. The way it worked is if you exceed any of these allocations, for the first time you exceed it on one particular component, you have to take a 10-place grid penalty. And then for any more times you go over the allocation, it's only a 5-place grid penalty. But if you want to replace everything at once, then you just have to start from the back, right? It all adds up and they say, okay, you know, instead of giving you a 50-place penalty, we'll just make you start at the back of the grid this time. So I'm not exactly sure what would have to be changed with the new ERS system. Maybe the energy store, maybe the MGU-K, I'm guessing, and maybe the MGU-H as well. Not really sure, but more than likely, especially because Ferrari already are struggling with extra parts, they probably, especially if they have new versions of these, that they're going to need to take if they want to deploy this new ERS power that they've magicked up at Maranello, they're going to have to take a fair few parts. So what this could well mean is there is going to be further grid penalties in play, and the rumour has it that only one of these Ferrari cars is going to have this, right? So what do you do if you're Ferrari? What would make sense really is to give the penalty to Carlos Sainz because Leclerc is higher in the championship, but, you know, it's Ferrari, right? Who knows what they're going to do? But also, maybe it's better to give the penalty to Charles Leclerc with a more powerful car and say, well, look, you're starting at the back, but it's Spa, you can make up positions. So maybe that's an option, right? But it does seem like at least one of the Ferrari cars will probably just start from the back, or at least take some sort of substantial grid penalty at Spa due to the new ERS system they're bringing in. Could be great for them in the long term, but in the short term, does it open the door a little bit, right? We've seen the fact that Lewis Hamilton is confident that Mercedes will get a win this season. Mercedes seem confident as well. Red Bull also, they're looking to, you know, lock up the championship once and for all, and this might give all of those teams and drivers an opportunity to do so if Ferrari do say, okay, Leclerc, it's time for you to go to the back of the grid again, sunshine. We've got some new ERS parts for you. So very much intrigued to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new as always. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.